In the mid-1930s, jazz, blues, and big band swing were all the dominant musical genres. And since the turn of the century, Black Americans had begun to take their places as leaders in the entertainment industry, despite the ongoing violence and injustice that they were facing at all levels all over the country. In the first few years of the decade, times were tough and musicians were hard to come by. So in 1936, when Billie Holiday was able to record her first songs, the music industry was primed for a new young talent. Abel Meeropol was a Jewish school teacher and a poet who taught English at a high school in the Bronx. Meeropol was struck when he saw an image of the brutal murder of 2 teenagers by an angry mob. And although these horrific events were not necessarily legal, they were largely tolerated due to the failure of local governments and law enforcement to intervene and to prosecute those responsible. Seeing this image was life-changing for Meeropol, who proceeded to write a powerful poem called Bitter Fruit. He later set the poem to music. At one point during a civil rights benefit at Madison Square Garden, the Black singer Laura Duncan joined the Meeropols on stage to sing the song. Meanwhile, Billie Holiday is mourning the loss of her father, Clarence Holiday, who was a veteran in France in the First World War and suffered severe damage to his lungs from exposure to mustard gas. This caused ongoing lung issues throughout the rest of his life. And in 1937, he was on tour in Texas when he became ill with what ended up being pneumonia, and he was refused treatment for being a Black man, which ultimately resulted in his death at 39 years old. Billie didn't know her father well, but she felt a connection to him through their mutual love of music, and his death hit her hard. Barney Josephson was the owner of the first integrated nightclub in New York called the Cafe Society, which opened in 1938. Billie started performing there regularly, and when Barney heard Strange Fruit at the Madison Square Garden show, he thought it would be perfect for Billie. So he introduced her to the song, and at first she hesitated. This was an unprecedented statement for the time, but she reflected on her own life, on the recent death of her father, and the unfairness of her own history and upbringing. And in 1939, she decided to make the song a permanent element of her show going forward. Some people sat silently and watched. Others were made so uncomfortable by her performance that they would get up and leave. When Columbia Records heard the song, they straight up told her they were not going to be recording it, and Billie went elsewhere. Who they eventually found was Milt Gabler of the small independent label Commodore Records, who agreed to let Billie record the song for the first time. Most radio stations refused to play it, but nevertheless the song spread, and eventually it was heard by someone who worked for the Federal Bureau of Investigation.